Yes, yes, team. Welcome to another episode of the Total Mental Performance Podcast. I've been super excited for this conversation. I really, really have. Today we've got Ric Moylan. He is a high performance coach, a dad, and a straight talking, fiery Mancunian. He's coached world champions, elite athletes, high level entrepreneurs. I first come across Ric on a documentary, I think it was. And Ric was coaching a mutual friend of ours. Is actually how we met through Scott Quigg, the former WBA world champion in boxing. And I saw Ric, and I was like, "That's cool. That'd be a cool job to do one day, maybe." And then that was kind of it. And then we didn't cross paths. And then me and Scott were doing a training session, and Ric kindly provided a location for us to train at. He took the piss out of my Arsenal shirt, which always is always a good start. I like that. And then we reached out, we jumped on a call, and a really, really cool, inspiring guy. And then he agreed to come on the podcast, and here we are. Ric, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Great to be on, and obviously nice. We've had a little talk before we press record, haven't we? Looking forward to this conversation, see where we go with it.
Yeah. I'm going to rattle off some of the people that you've worked with. And as a Brit, you probably go, oh, God, because we're quite, we're not like our American counterparts where we like to scream and shout. But some of the athletes you've worked with, and me being obviously a former boxer, a huge boxing fan, I look at your receipts and it's amazing. You've got Scott Quigg, Anthony Crawler, Tony Bellew, Ryan Burnett. You helped Ricky with his comeback fight, Ricky Hatton. You've worked with Rabichenko, Frankie Gavin, former world amateur champion, British and Commonwealth champion. And then you've also worked with athletes across other sports, Liam Brody in tennis, Nina Ross. You've worked with professional football clubs, professional football players. I understand you're on NDAs, so we can't exactly go into the detail on those. But you're a man that's been about in the high performance field. And when I asked Scott, I went, right, what's Ric's gig? And I said, is he an S&C coach? Is he a sports scientist? And straight away Scott went, no, he's miles more than that. And no disrespect to S&C coaches and sports scientists, he's miles more than that. And I said, why? And he said, he understands how people ticks. He understands how people operate. He understands how athletes perform. I've been really excited to have this conversation ever since. I'll stop blowing smoke up your ass now. But
I was going to say, you carry on. This is I'm here for this, So
yeah. So I'm curious. What does high performance mean to you, and how does that come up in your field? You obviously specialize in athletes, and you've gone more into business leaders as well. But what does it actually mean to Ric today?
There's the key word, by the way, today. If you'd have asked me this question 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you'd have probably, I'm certain, got different answers. I used to call it the high performance jigsaw. Originally used to come out with all the old cliches as well, like, people being the best version of themselves and all that kind of stuff. And then that never really told us anything. I came across this thing of the high performance jigsaw, and that aligned more with what I believed and thought and felt that high performance was for a period of time. But then I like a bit of a story, so I'm going to give you a bit of a story, which I think will answer that question. My dad was an engineer all his life, and he never wanted to retire, but he's in decent health, but he had a number of strokes, so he had to retire. He was kind of medically forced to retire. And we laugh and joke because he can fix anything. I cannot fix a thing. I am useless at putting shelves. You would not want me to put a shelf up for you or whatever. Anyway, to keep my dad active and to keep him working, I get him to do all my repairs for me. I get him to fix all my stuff for me. Not because it helps me, of course, because it keeps my dad active. Anyway, all jokes aside, Dad has had this little story that he was developing in his head, that he was slowing down and that he couldn't do these things anymore, couldn't fix these things anymore, and all that kind of stuff. Which I, of course, challenged. And anyway, Dad fixed something for me a few years ago, literally a couple of years ago. And we had a bit of a chat, and I said to him, "See, Dad," I said, "you can fix things. You still got it. You can still do anything you put your mind to." And he said, "Yeah, that's true, son. You're right." He said, "But I also can fix things when I've got the right tools for the job." And I was like, "Just say that again." And he said, "I can fix things when I've got the right tools for the job." So what because I wrote that down. It's in all my slides, by the way, and in all my talks and seminars. And what high performance means to me is giving people the right tools for the job.
Makes total sense. And I think you probably get a lot of messages from coaches like I do saying like, well, what's your secret, or how can I get better results? And what you said there is exactly that. It's having the right tools, the right framework, the right understanding of when to use a hammer, when to use a scalpel,
Yep.
when to use a screwdriver. Yeah.
Yep.
Couldn't have put it more aptly myself. Beautiful.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, I said to my dad, I said, that's going to go in me in me work. And he said, don't you put any bloody pictures in of me. And I said, okay, Dad, of course not. And of course there's a picture of me dad in my slides and whatnot now, so which I'm not sure he knows about, so hope he doesn't listen. But there we go. Yeah, that's what high performance is for me, is that we face a number of challenges, whether that's in our sporting life as an athlete, whether that's in business, as a somebody of a senior leadership type position, CEO, all that kind of stuff. And the one skill that we've often, the one tool that we've often got in abundance is the skill. I just said it, the skill tool. We know how to do the job. Combat athletes generally know how to fight. They know how to jab. CEOs generally know how to make businesses function day to day. But that's not the only tool that's required for the job. So my role as high performance coach is to identify what other tools are required, and where it within my skill set, give them the tools for the job.
Take me back to the beginning of where it all started. Did you have an apprenticeship, not a formal apprenticeship like you go into a company and do that, but where did you start, and was there anyone in your corner? I believe we're all stood on the shoulders of giants, right? Was there anywhere you'd say, look, this is where I started, and here are some of the things I learned from this giant in the game? Or I'm curious.
Yeah, I worked as a personal trainer for quite a long period of time, and I kind of stumbled into that. And it's funny how all these things circle back and help you out in life. And I had a number of giants as you've described them, but I worked at a gym in city centre Manchester, and it's simply because I decided to go to university to go and get my degree, and I needed a job. And I saw it in the newspaper. That's how long ago it was. It was in the newspaper, the job, and I got a part-time job. And then what I found was that this was a very, very modern gym at that time, but very old-fashioned in today's terms. It was just kind of rows of treadmills and all that kind of stuff. And it was situated in city centre Manchester, right in the corporate world. So I had no experience of working in a gym in city centre Manchester. I had no experience of corporate life, corporate people. What I was pretty good at is I knew how to train a little bit. I had some qualifications at the time, but I had also done a bit of combat in my time, combat sports, and I could hold the pads, and I'm not claiming to be world class pad man or world class trainer or anything like that, but so I saw all these people in the gym, in my mind, bored out of their brains on treadmills and cross trainers and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, do you know what? I'll just get them off those, and we'll do pads instead, and we'll do boxing circuits instead, and all that kind of stuff. It gave me my early experiences in being a personal trainer, but it was the personal side where my skills developed. I unknowingly met two champions in that gym. One of them was a chap who owned a restaurant locally, but was a big corporate restaurant, and he taught me the art of networking, the art of talking to people, of listening, understanding, asking the right questions, building relationships. but he also introduced me to the parents of a young Liam Brodie
Mm.
at that time.
Yeah.
And now Liam was a real rising star junior player who's probably only 8 or 9 years old at the time. But his parents had decided on the pathway. This is, I'm not breaking any client privilege or anything. This is all out in the public domain. But his parents had decided on the pathway they wanted to take Liam's tennis. It was clear that he was talented. That required an awful lot of funding, and funding was therefore quite tight. I had never worked with tennis players in my life. I'm certainly not a particularly good tennis player either. But Steve said to me, why don't you do a bit of work with this young lad? And I said, well, I've never worked with a tennis player before. And he was like, well, I'm sure you'll learn. I'm sure you'll pick it up. And that started my journey with Liam Brodie. A number of years later, and I'll move on to pro sport in a second, but a number of years later, when I was working with young Anthony Crolla at the time, a young Tony Bellew, a young Frankie Gavin, a young Stephen Bell, a young Ronnie Heffron, all out of Arnie's gym in Manchester. I'd been there for a couple of years and got a bit of work experience there, and I'd done a little bit of work for, was paid as well, but it certainly wasn't going to make me rich, but I loved it. It didn't matter. Another chap that I'd met in that same gym for many years earlier, who used to come to my box fit circuit classes and all that kind of stuff. I'd never been made aware he was quite a confidential guy. He was Ricky Hatton's manager. Legal representative. Paul Speak is well known as being Ricky's manager agent. This chap was, from a legal perspective, was Ricky's manager. So
Wow.
unbeknownst to me, I'd just through working in a gym, trying to pass my degree, trying to get some money, get some experience. I'd met two champions, Steve Pilling, he's called, and Gareth Williams, who for many years after. I've still got relationships with both of them. For many years after, became champions in my life. I very much made the decision that I wanted to work in professional sport, and I also had another champion from working in another gym who was a bit ahead of the game with me, and he was called Darren Roberts, and he was also working by this point in pro sport. He became a mentor. I'm a huge believer in mentorship. I also worked for Darren for not very much money for a period of time, working with Red Bull and Red Bull Racing and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, that was my start. My start was carrying bags, doing the shit jobs, doing whatever I could to build relationships, and then slowly but surely, and I think this is my key point, once I earned trust, I could then start to implement a few ideas. But it was sleeves up, head down, working with young athletes, working for not much money, but getting my stripes on my shoulders. That's where it started.
Oh, amazing. There's so much to take out of that. The first part is just being there in the room, like just getting into the room and being around people and listening and learning. And I think coaches today, particularly young coaches that are starting out, I think they see all of the coaches doing really well and how much money they're making online, and they kind of forget the apprenticeship phase of, even if it's not directly even in coaching or performance coaching, of just being around high performers or being around really top people. That would just give you little nuggets. They'll just give you little whispers in the ear. Have you tried doing it this way? Or what's going on, mate? Why are you struggling with that? And when you have got those people around you, you just through osmosis, you're just absorbing, observing, and not only observing everything that works, but you're also learning from them. They say, hey, you know what? This didn't work for me. Here's what I learned from it. So I think there's something to be said when it comes to high performance around your environment and having the right people around you. So that's one big thing that I take. The second big thing that I take is, like you said, building that trust, and also not being afraid to step into a new realm. And you did it really honestly and transparently. Look, I've never worked in tennis. here's a skill set that I've got. We can try it if you want. And someone give you a push and said, go on then. And, you go and get great results. So the second part, I think, is stepping out your comfort zone and going, all right, let's try. And that takes a level of courage, backing yourself, but then also humility to own that. Because you get a lot of people that walk in and they say, I'm the boss, I know what I'm doing, it's my way or the highway. But it just sounds like you slipped into that in a really nice and powerful way. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it took, going back to the champions, Steve, the chap who owns the restaurant, who's a very worldly wise gentleman, he instilled, as I say, he introduced me to tons of, executives, people in the corporate world. He taught to me about networking, all those kind of things. He also taught me about patience, and that sometimes these relationships have got to be harvested, and that takes a bit of time. So trust is not something that you can force in a 1 minute, 5 minute single meeting conversation. It was something that accrued over a period of time, over a number of hours of coaching, a number of contact time between you and the athlete, or these were often junior athletes. So you and the athlete's family, you and the athlete's, parents. It was something that took time, it took effort, it took sticking to your word, it took doing the things that you said you would do. So yeah, I was very, very lucky. I've had a number of great people around me who showed me the way in various different areas. It's enabled me to work a lot in combat sport, which was a huge passion. But then I've had some incredible experiences with tennis, with Liam and the British tennis team, going all over Europe, going all over the world. Obviously Wimbledon, French Open, places like that, being on court with Federer, you name it. Amazing, incredible things. That led to Red Bull, which led to working with the military, the police force, special forces, all that kind of stuff. And I often say to younger coaches in particular, I say, because one of the questions I get asked is, why don't you do as much of that now? And I say, well, you've got to be on the train or off the train, particularly with an athlete. And it's very much a young single, and that's why I'm smirking. It's very much, or it can be, a young single person's lifestyle. I still think I'm quite young. Sadly for my fiance Laura, I'm not single anymore. So I had a phenomenal 20 or so years of being right in the trenches with that world, and then that was my time, and I moved on to new challenges and new things I wanted to achieve.
Yeah, it comes down to what gets you out of bed in the morning and what projects that inspired you, say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I'm even noticing that in my client base. It's like what you started with and what excites you, and those types of projects, they start to shift and change with time, because as a coach you grow and you develop and you mature and you start to pick out the things that you're interested in. No, it makes total sense. One thing I'm really curious to learn from you is I only work with business owners, entrepreneurs, high net worths, people in that space that are really good at business. I've never worked with athletes. I worked with a professional tennis player. I've worked with a couple of other high-level amateurs, but I've never gone all in. It's not my speciality. It's not that I'm afraid of it, but I know my lane, and I'm also very transparent. When I've had a couple of high-profile athletes reach out to me and I've said, listen, I specialize in business and entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And whilst I boxed at a decent level, I was never world champion material. So I feel I can help you, but I don't feel I can give you the time and the energy that you need. Because like you said, you got to be on the train with athletes. It's a day-by-day thing. And it's not a let's catch up every couple of weeks commitment. It's how you feel and what's going on. Mm-hmm. So what I'm really keen to glean from you is you've now gone from sports to business. Is there any key difference between working with a world champion athlete or working with a high level business person or an entrepreneur? What are the key differences? I know contact time and proximity is one, as well as the travel. But yeah, what key differences would you say that you see between the two?
It's so you're absolutely right. The obvious ones are contact time and all that kind of stuff, but the situations are very different. You know, going to step into a boxing ring or onto a tennis court, onto a football pitch. Um, the physiology is almost exactly the same. The challenges are almost exactly the same. The things that your toolkit can give them are almost exactly the same. Um, a lot of people believe that CEOs, high level, high net worthers, all that kind of stuff, have really got their shit together.
No.
And more often than not, as you know, they haven't. They are incredibly good at business, but like any of us, they've got their areas of development. Um, a lot of people believe that the CEO, the top person, is their life is great, and actually, one of the things that I hear a lot is that they're lonely. That it's a lonely challenge at the top, because it's very, very, very stressful. There's huge responsibilities at stake. There is big boom and bust opportunities. It just like going for a world title fight. The situation is completely different. How that manifests internally is almost exactly the same. So, what are the challenges that I face? Overwhelm, stress, self doubt, challenges with the inner voice that people believe that a high level executive doesn't suffer from. People believe that anyone who's a top, who's a CEO or who's a top level athlete, they believe that they're almost like superhuman. They're just human. They're just human. They're just human. So, it's conversations can often start like, hey, how we doing? Oh, just sorry, I just nearly pulled my headphones out there, which was ironic. But oh, yeah, I'm busy. How are you sleeping? Not great. Tell me about, how your stress levels are. I'm stressed. And then we start digging deeper. And what does that look like? They've got uh, boardroom meetings. They've got massive client deals that they've got to win. High pressure. How what's that doing to them? It's affecting their nervous system. It's affecting the way they eat. It's affecting the way they rest. They lack boundaries between business life, home life. You have the same conversation with high level athlete. How are you
Mm,
feeling?
no.
Oh, what they'll often say is, "Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, well, there's an ego, isn't there, with
Yeah,
athletes,
yeah,
and
I'm
also
fine."
weaknesses. So this is what I'm really curious about because I think from the outside in, if I look at it, I think athletes must be harder because of it, particularly in combat sports. To be vulnerable is weak. I remember even back in the day. You'd be on an England camp. How I fine, everything's fine. You don't want to be the weak one out. Or you're on a testing day, or you'd be even in your local gym. You didn't want to be the weak one. So there is like much more of a closed shop mentality. Whereas
Yep,
with those executives, it's actually easy for me. I'd imagine it's so much easier because they're
absolutely.
like, yeah, no, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I've got loads of shit on my plate, and I've got to get
Yep,
shit done. So, yeah,
yeah.
tell me more about the athlete that's closed, arms folded, fine you. How do you break them down and how do you work your way in?
So it was it was fascinating because sports science, particularly like physical testing and all that kind of stuff, it gives you these scores, it gives you these charts, it gives you this line on the graph, and this line on the graph tells you that your athlete is doing well. But what it doesn't take into account is, are they having a bad day?
Yeah.
Have they had an argument at home before they've come into the gym that day? Are they scared, which they don't want to admit? And to answer the question, how do I break them down? How do I build trust? How do I let them know that that problem that they've got first and foremost, it's okay. They are human. They are normal. How can I give them that safe space to then bring that problem or that whatever is going on into their forefront of their mind, and how do I bring it so that they're able to communicate? It changed my coaching practice.
Mm.
We off camera before talked about environment. How have I broken these athletes down? Often I haven't. We've gone for a walk. We've gone
Mm.
for a walk. We've been forward facing, going for a walk, and all of a sudden it all just blurts out. I've had some of the best results I've ever had, some of my most impactful moments with athletes out of a gym, out of a office-based setting, where out of a setting where I'm sat behind a laptop typing while they're talking to me or taking notes in their file, away from those very clinical settings, away from where I've turned up formally dressed. Instead, we've gone for a coffee. I don't drink coffee; I drink tea. But we've gone for it. Let's have a catch up. I've just framed it differently,
Yeah, yeah.
and once they feel relaxed, once they feel safe, and once you get them to a place that actually they are okay to be vulnerable, they are not superhuman. They may do superhuman things, but they are not superhuman. It's okay to just be Kieran or Rick.
Mm.
Often then it all comes out, and then as you know, Kieran, many times in coaching, they will find their own answers. We're there to merely help them steer the boat. They row the boat, and as I say, I've had many impactful sessions and real change moments from. It hasn't been the latest hack. It hasn't been the latest technique. It hasn't been the latest piece of research. It's been making them feel like, hey, I've got your back. You can trust me. Um, I'm here to listen. I'm here to make you feel safe, and you can trust me.
Mm.
And that's 3 or 4 times I've referenced that word now, because it is absolutely paramount, in my humble opinion, in the coach-client relationship. That without trust, in the absence of trust, you cannot build. Patrick Lencioni talks about it in his 5 dysfunctions of a team. The foundation is trust, and when trust is there, um, everything else we can it all comes out. We can fix it.
Mhm.
If I haven't got the skill set to fix it, I will bring the right person into our fold, and the trust process will build again. And I think that's my practice.
Mm. Trust is the raw material upon which, or the foundation upon which you build. It makes total sense, and it goes both ways as well. It's not just athlete to coach, but it's also coach to client.
Hundred
Because
percent.
if you can't count, if you feel that you cannot trust the client, whether that's A, to respect the process, to respect your time, to
Yep.
respect themselves, and to respect you, then they become uncoachable. And top coaches
Yep.
will say, "Hey, this isn't going to work." But I 100% agree. The trust element. There's something I'd like to touch on, which as soon as you said it, I made the connection, not in a sporting sense, but more in a um, commercial sense, which was the data. So, with your background in sports science and bringing in a really grounded approach to working with athletes, particularly at a time when boxing is one of the oldest sports in the world. There's so many old school weights will make you slow and you
Yeah.
shouldn't lift weight. I remember my coaches telling me that, when I was thinking about, I'm going to get into the gym, like, how can I do this? And they're like, no, weights will make you slow, don't do it.
Yeah.
So you going in and breaking that down. But the data piece is particularly interesting because for the clients that I work with, they're all looking at data. They're looking at spreadsheets every day. They're looking at
Yep.
dashboards every day. And what's amazing is the dashboards can be telling them business is great, everything's booming, they're on fire, and they feel like the whole place is about to fall apart because their right-hand man of the last 4 years decided to go to a competitor. And then a competitor's also launched another product and they're getting a little bit spooked by it. And, there's a lot of chaos and turmoil going on. And then even though you've got the even though you've got the data saying, look, you're smashing it, even your sleep's good, your training's good. I'm pointing at my head for anyone that's listening back to this. If you haven't got the calm, the clarity, and the focus of mind to help them navigate that, it's all, the data's irrelevant. Like it really doesn't matter.
Absolutely. Um, Going back to conversations, um, I've had 1,000 conversations over the last couple of years, and um, they all start the same. How's things? Yeah, great. How's work? Busy.
Mm,
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Oh, you're busy at work. Busy. Chaos. Busy. Everybody's busy
yeah.
now, and I look at the toolkit that I used to use with clients, and we've had to expand that toolkit because we've had to, like anything, there's as the demands change, we have to flex. We have to flex to suit it, and stress, busyness, overwhelm are hugely common. And like you say, what I would historically used to do with all my clients is get fit, thrash them in the gym, this, that, the other. But it's having things like, I mean, even a lot of them wear whoops now and all this kind of stuff. But it's having that wider toolkit and a slightly more, a slightly more global approach to understand. Okay, when is it time to take a rest? When is it time to go a little bit harder? When's it time to treat yourself, let your hair down? Because I believe in living life as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I'm not here to tell all my clients that they can't ever have a drink or they can't ever go out for a nice meal or
Mm,
that kind of stuff. Equally, if that's how they want to live their life, then great. But
yeah.
I wrote an email to my database a few months ago, and I think that was a profound email, because I've got a event that I've been running in the last couple of years called Reset Summit, and it targets executives and corporates and office workers and whatnot like that. And um, the subject heading was, "Are you one email away from falling apart?"
Ooh, nice.
And my inbox just went and the amount of people that were like, oh my lord, this email's spoken to me, I'm one email away from exploding, or
Yeah,
one email away from bursting into tears, or one email away from flipping my desk up, and all that kind of stuff. And I think to bring it back is that ultimately the demands of life have changed. It's produced many, many, many advantages. We're sat at totally different parts of the world right now, having this
yeah,
great conversation. Hopefully, is going to provide some value to your listeners.
yeah,
I had an idea of what I believed success was for a very short period of time when I started working with executives, and I've gone sideways here, but bear with me, and there is a reason for it. For a short period of time, I believed that success would mean having global impact and having clients all over the world. And I managed to achieve that fairly quickly because, if you set your mind to
yeah.
something and then do the right things to get there, then you can achieve it. And it was great. I was like, I've just signed up this company that I'm working with in Houston, Texas. Amazing. I've also just signed this company up in the Middle East. Amazing. This is brilliant. The problem I had was that while Houston, Texas are awake in work, the Middle East are asleep.
Yeah.
While the Middle East are asleep, you get it, vice
Yeah.
versa. So what was I doing? Working all the time, hardly ever sleeping, hardly ever switching off, no boundaries, emails in bed, using my phone, blah, 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 blah. And before I knew it, actually, I was moving towards all the challenges of the people that I was coaching.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's almost like you're affected by the virus that they were experiencing, and then
Absolutely.
next thing you know, you're like,
Absolutely.
"Oh my god!" Yeah, but there's
Yeah.
beauty in that because you can resonate. You're like, "Ah, that's what these guys. That's what they're wrestling with." Yeah,
Absolutely. Because they've got business deals in the States, in the Middle East, etc., etc. And if they're not careful, they are literally, when we talk about burnout, I think that's a commonly termed phrase. But what I said to a lot of my clients is they are completely overstimulated.
Yeah, that's true.
They just never switch off. And going back to the earlier question about differences and challenges between business and exec and whatnot like that, I looked at some of the things that athletes do really, really well. And of course, there's things that they can always improve on. But one of the things that some of the top athletes that I've worked with do really, really, really well is when it's time to rest and recover, they rest and recover. And they hold that boundary. They train really, really, really hard. But then they recover really, really, really well. So the point I'm making is that when an athlete is heading towards performance, there's a huge process that they undertake to head towards high performance. The high level executive is in high performance day in, day out, week in, week out. But how much time are they doing working on the tools, instilling the tools, training, rest, recovery, etc., to support high performance? The athletes prepare loads for shorter periods of high performance. Executives are in constant high performance with minimal preparation. And I think showing them that model has been something that's led to quite a lot of shift with the people I've worked with.
100%. Scott told me something because he's asking me about my training history, and for anyone that's listening, Scott's training me now, and I feel like a 12-year-old again, all over again. The basics, he's drilling me on technical details. It's amazing. I'm so grateful that we have that experience and that time together now. But I told him when I was an amateur, between I'd say 19 and 21, I started training full time, and I'm 5'7". 172 centimeters, and I was 56 kilos, and I was always 1 kilo within my fight weight year round. Because as an amateur, that's the expectation, right? You don't have these big camps where you're on and you're off, and you're on, you're off. It's like, you stay within 1 to 2 kilos max, and you cut down. And I said to him, I always used to be injured, and the reason I haven't made a return to the ring in the last 8-9 years, number one, I've been busy. I've been working on coaching, I've been working on building businesses and doing that. So that's not been my focus. And number two is whenever I've tried to come back, I've always come back injured. And the first thing he said is, you're probably not recovering properly. Mm-hmm. And he went, tell me about when you were training full time. What was you like? And I was like, I was up at 6 a.m, weigh myself, go for a run, come back. Then I'd go probably train again, technical. And then either in the evening, it'd be a boxing session, like sparring, or it'd be strength and conditioning, and I'll do 2 to 3 sessions a day, 5 days a week, rest on Saturdays, and maybe a bit of sparring on Sundays. And I was eating about 1,400 calories a day. He goes, what was your sleep like? And I went, I was so anxious, I couldn't sleep. I was sleeping like 4, 5, 6 hours a night. And he goes, do you know how much I used to sleep? And I went, what's that? He goes, 10 hours a day. Sometimes I didn't sleep 12 hours a day. Yeah. And just that little, that makes so much sense from an athlete's standpoint. They are very, very good at resting. Now, they very much have a unilateral focus, which is, and these are young people as well, right, which are in their teens or 20s. So they've only got one thing to focus on, which is how do I be the best at my sport? That's a double-edged sword, because when your sport's not going well, your identity starts to collapse. I remember I'd have a bad sparring session or I'd lose a fight, and because I had nothing to do all day other than train, I'd be so in my own head. But the recovery piece, so interesting, because I see exactly the same with my clients. I think a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs, they're not actually high performing. They've just weaponized anxiety, and they've used that as a whip to just squeeze and attack what they believe high performance is, which often they think is output and volume versus precision and quality. But the catch-22 is when you are mentally and physically recovered, you can do more in less time, you can make better decisions, you make your life easier. But when you are in that high stress situation and you're in fight or flight 24/7, no wonder everybody's one email away from exploding. I see that all the time. And the busy thing, a kind of twinkle in my eye came in when you said the busy things. I get that with my clients all the time. I had one client, He told me, Kieran, I'm too busy to come to our session tomorrow. I really
Yep.
apologize. And I texted him back and I said, I don't believe you. And if you're right, I'll comp you the rest of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And he went, deal, I'm in. I'll see you there. So he comes in and he tells me, I've got all this going on and this going on and this going on. Like, I don't have time for this call today. I kind of regret accepting this. Da, da, da. And I said, I don't believe you. And he's sort of, yeah, that pissed me off when you said that. Why don't you believe me? And I said, I think you're probably thinking about everything that you've got to do too much versus what you actually have to do. And all I did, I like working in spreadsheets because my clients understand spreadsheets, and my background in software sales and particularly in data analytics, I was using a lot of spreadsheets. So we speak the same language. I just pulled up a spreadsheet and I put one column A. All right, what? What have you got on your plate? What's on your mind? Just tell me anything that's on your mind. We had 27 items. I went, wow, that's a lot. Now, then column B, I put, is it a task or is it a thought? And then we just categorized, and that 27 items went down from 27 things he thought he had to do to 14 things he had to do. I went, well, that's convenient. You've got 13 less things. Okay. Yeah. All right. And then, you know, the Eisenhower matrix, Q1, yep. Q2, Q3, yep. Q4. So urgent and important, not urgent for those listening, not urgent, but important, urgent for someone else, and then not urgent, not important. And I just went, right, let's just bang through these, right? Which of these are Q1s and which of these are Q2s, Q3s, Q4s? And he put down 6 Q1s, and I really challenged him, and he went, all right, there's only 3 Q1s. And then we went, great, so he has 3 Q1s, he's got the rest of his Q2s, and the rest were Q3s and Q4s, which took him off his plate. And then we went, right, delegate. Who can actually take this off your plate? And he could actually delegate one of the Q1s, he could delegate a lot of the Q2s, and he only had 3 things left. And I said, how long are these things going to take you? And it was only going to take 8 hours. So I went, but do you understand why I'm calling you bluff here? You're not that busy. And he went, you're not going to comp the rest of my program then? I went, well, you tell me. Did you deserve that? And he went, no, you're right.
Absolutely not.
Right? Yeah. It's this idea of busy. I think it comes back to another word that you used, which I really resonate with, which is overstimulation. I don't think people are as busy as they think. They're overly stimulated and they're struggling to organize their thoughts and distinguish what is a thought and what is a task, what needs to be done, what can be delegated. And when you can just, I like using spreadsheets, they're super visual, because he's like, can I get a copy of that? And I said, yeah, sure. You fire it over and then you get a text in the evening, everything's been delegated, everything's been done, I feel miles better. And so I think the busy trap really just comes from a noisy digital world. And like you said, the advantages of us being able to connect and do this, it's amazing. But there is a cost that comes with it.
Absolutely. And for those of us that have got an Apple, iPhone, whatever, you get that little Monday morning thing that gives you your screen time average for the week previously that counteracts your busyness or your busy argument straight away. We are absolutely, in my mind, overstimulated, and it comes down to it when we simplify all of this. It's training. What are we training? You know, you might be training with Scott right now, and he might just be working on your jab, and you're just repeating. And I'm pretty confident, not to give Scott too many compliments because we definitely don't want to do that, but I'm pretty confident that fairly quickly he'll have identified a couple of areas of development. You alter them, you then do the reps on that, and you start to improve.
That's exactly what's happened, by the way.
I'm
just 3 weeks coming into midway through the third week, and already I sent videos to my dad. Scott said, send this video, keep this video, keep it in your mind. I sent it to my dad, and I said, Dad, stick with that. And I sent him. My dad followed my boxing for years, right? And I sent him the next video, and he's like, "Fucking hell, look at that!" And it is true. He's just
absolutely
the fundamentals. He's just gone right. Sit back a little bit, adjust your feet, side on, bosh,
and then repeat. And repeat
again. We've been
again.
drilling it again and again and again.
Review, marginally alter, and repeat. And the problem is with a lot of high performance is it's quite repetitive and it's quite boring, and it isn't massively stimulating. It isn't feeding that stimulation thing going on. What happens with the client that tells us that they are too busy is that their self-talk has left them. And you know, just like training your body, whether that's a jab, whether that's doing a push-up or a squat, Your brain, your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, they've got to be trained. They've got to be worked on, because we are facing challenges now that are ever changing, ever increasing. We are bombarded with
Yeah.
information, stimulation, all those kind of things. The more we train it, the more we feed it,
Yeah.
the more that negative loop will grow. We have to break those patterns sometimes, and sometimes it requires a coach, because one of the challenges for senior executives, and you introduced me as a fiery, straight talking Mancunian, so
You're gonna play that card. Bring it on.
I'm gonna play that, is that they've got no one to call them out on their own bullshit. And that was a challenge that was also present with top level athletes as well, is that with often the athletes I grew, I said the word, I grew and evolved with those athletes, and we had a phenomenal relationship. But what happened was, as they became top level athletes, they also started to earn more money, started to get more fame, started to get more adulation and all that. They had developing echo chambers. This is nothing against any of the athletes I would have ever
They're just
worked with,
they're
by
just
the way.
human.
They are just humans, and
Yeah.
as the echo chamber grew, so would sometimes the challenges, and my role would often be to call them out on that bullshit, and to say, hey, like you just said, I don't believe you. Hold on a minute. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge that thought, that feeling. I'm gonna present a different case. And we all know the ego kicks in sometimes as well. Um, my role was and is to look after my clients. That's what we do. Our role is to guide them. But actually, a lot of the people that were around are also surrounded by echo chambers. And our role sometimes, as my mother used to say, the old saying is, the truth hurts. And sometimes um, challenging those thoughts, because they haven't put the reps in and done the work, they're too busy, etc. They're morphing down a different pathway. Our job sometimes is to hard stop it and say, hang on, that
Mm.
story that you're telling yourself, I'm going to challenge it. But what we have to do as coaches is we challenge it with process, with facts. We challenge it with tactics, rather than uh, locking horns with emotions and feelings.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. I got a question for you. How when you're dealing, because with my clients, their experience, they've seen the world, they're able to, yeah, they have egos, and sometimes you challenge them and their ego don't like it and they throw their toys out the pram, and then you hold up the mirror and you say to them, look, it's your job. If you don't like the reflection, you can either A, lean into it, or B, you can walk away. What do you want to do? And sometimes they do. Sometimes they go, I don't want to deal with that, and they leave that. But what I am curious about is when you're working with, say, an athlete, and they're coming into their prime, maybe 25 to 30, and they've got a lot of money, a lot of success, a lot of adulation. How there'll be some guys that are pretty old school, and it doesn't matter. The gaffer's the gaffer. But then there's other athletes that'll go, well, actually, I'm more important now. I'm the fucking man. I'm the world champion. Yeah, you gotta respect me for who I am and where I come from. And how have you dealt with that as a coach? And what have you seen some of the biggest lessons? And without breaking confidentiality with anyone or anything like that, I'm curious on that piece.
Um, I think it's all about values. I think our work has we have to delve into their values. Um, we have to become clear on our values. We sometimes have to be reminded of our values, because we can lose our way. We're only human. We can be distracted. We can be we can have our head turned by the latest shiny object syndrome. I've always done a lot of work, and kept it at front and center of mind with the people that I'm working with, particularly when fame and fortune is something that is a possibility. Fame more so than fortune, in my experience, is that what are your core values, and doing deep work on what your core values are. That said, alongside that, I also have to be clear and true to what my core values are.
Mm.
And we don't have to be completely the same, but I do think there has to be some alignment there, because I think when core values aren't aligned, it leads to conflict. And there has been times with athletes where I've said to them, "This is the end of the road, and here is my reasons why," um, and that's regrettable. But ultimately, I cannot fix everybody. I cannot coach everybody, and like you touched on earlier, Kieran, not everybody is coachable, or certainly not everybody is coachable by me. And
Mm.
having that realization, we talked off air that sometimes as well, things just come to a natural end. And sometimes it's great for an athlete to just hear a different voice, to just hear a different
Oh.
perspective. But I think when the challenge of a million voices telling them what they should be doing, how they should be improving, how they should be spending their time, where they should be
Mm.
spending their money, all of those kind of things. I think for me, we have uh, a small team, a tight knit team, a team that communicates is very, very important around an athlete, which is just the same as in a boardroom. That's just the same as your C suite level guys that are around the boardroom. And that I go back to my word trust, but also clear communication. Sometimes involves healthy conflict as well. Conflict is healthy as long as it's done in the right way. Um, but then, as long as our values are aligned, as long as we're all working towards the same clear goals and clear outcomes, usually we can find a way forward. I think when our values are muddy, unclear, disconnected, that's when we've got problems. So for me, it's always about values, and I'm not afraid. We talk about coaching and adapting the coaching styles. When I was younger, I was often quiet. I think I would have, even though I'm on the shorter side of life, definitely I was often referred to as a bit of a sergeant major when I was younger, and I perhaps lacked flexibility in my coaching approach. With the benefit of time and wisdom, and I was served over the years, I'm more than happy to flex my style. I'm more than happy to use the carrot, use the stick, all the different leadership styles, coaching styles, all that kind of stuff. What I will not bend on is values.
Mm.
And so I do a lot of work with my clients to make sure they are clear on their values. I've also got to be clear on mine, and then we can achieve alignment. And I'm not afraid to have a honest, open confrontation if we are wavering away from our core values.
Mm. I think core values is a very important piece, without a doubt. And even in my experience as a coach with clients, I haven't actually, and this is something for me to take away and learn. So thank you. I haven't actually really communicated my core values to a degree. I've communicated the company values: be water, be honor, be love. So I guess clients coming into TMP and working across those programs, they're aware of what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on an intimate setting, that's definitely something, because I'm very principled. I'm quite old school,
Yeah.
and I won't do anything that goes against my values, even if there's a pound note in front of me. And you see
Yeah.
that a lot working in Dubai, working in these places where there's a lot of pound notes, but you got to turn them down because you'll always resent yourself in the process if you don't operate within your core values. I think that's I'm going to take that away. I'm going to go and write some stuff, a core value statement in there. When you're with experience and as clients are going through the levels, values shift. I've noticed clients' values shift, particularly if they start to become more successful. I've worked with a few creators that have gone from, like a relatively sizable following to millions of followers across platforms. in that space, and you slowly start to see their values shifting on what's important. I'm curious, how do you work with athletes in particular as you start to see that shift? Is it a revalues alignment and a values elicitation? You go, right, here were the values that I understood you operated with. Do you feel like you're operating in those, or have your values changed and doing like, yeah, I'm curious about that shift.
I think what needs to be determined as well is what values are, what's conscious and what's unconscious. So you would challenge their behaviors, their actions, their values, and some of the clients aren't even aware that they're
Yeah.
doing it. So I think bringing things to people's awareness often, and that's where we as coaches, we as we have to make sure that we're in control of our emotions, we're
Yeah.
in control of our communication, we're clear and concise, and not operating from a place of anger or frustration, but we're operating in facts and
Mm,
um, but as values shift, a lot of people aren't, in my experience, aren't even aware that they're doing it, and again, they will then develop this story as and almost justification as to why.
mm,
And for me, I have to challenge that. I have to challenge it, but I have to challenge it in the right manner. And I think timing's important.
mm.
You challenge somebody at the wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong situation, and you're only going to get one outcome.
Especially on something as sensitive as values. As
Absolutely.
soon as you go on, like whenever you start working on a values level, that gets super interesting because things can very quickly turn into a feeling of judgment and a feeling of attack
Yeah.
when
So
you're on a values level, you know? So they are delicate conversations, but oh man, they're life changing conversations.
absolutely, and for me, the tactic is really, really clear. If I have to be the one that says it and really points it out, then I don't think we're there. I think we're really there when it's the client that communicates. You know, the big shifts are. You know, I've been having a think, and this is what I've recognised. This is what I've realised. I want to talk to you, or I want, not that I require apologies, by the way, because I don't. But I'll often get, you know, I want to apologise because I've realised that this is how I've been behaving, and I'm very, very clear that an apology is not required. And but often I will facilitate that and carry that conversation on. It's great that you've had this realization. It's great that you've had these thoughts. It's great that you've recognized these patterns of behavior. What has that what has that taught you? What have you learned about yourself? How are you going to move forward and ensure that this pattern of behavior doesn't repeat? So for me, I think as a coach, I've really nailed my job down when it's not me giving the client the answers. I think that the more profound changes I get with clients, the greater shifts I get with clients, it's often in simplicity. I will find myself saying, I'm really glad I'm really glad you've had those thoughts and feelings. That's great. Kieran, that's great. That's it. You know, that's it. You know, how are we moving forward then? Kieran, please tell me how we're moving forward. I'm
Yeah.
finding that as I develop more and more skills as a coach, my questions are actually becoming more simple. My questions are actually becoming shorter. It's giving the client the space to think and express themselves and delve inwards on themselves that creates the profound shifts. Previously in my practice, I would often seek to give loads of value.
Mm,
Actually, now, when a client has a real shift, a real sense of, you know, reflection, I'll often be like, great, it's really good we've got to that point. Tell me how you're going to move forward.
yeah.
So my work is actually really, really simple.
Absolutely. You know, I learned this in a business mentorship. Actually, simple scales, complex fails, right? And if you look at like all top performers, they just keep things really simple.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Some of the entrepreneurs I work with have really complicated businesses, whether that's through financial technology, whether that's through data analytics, whether that's through investing in 5 different businesses at once. When you speak to them, they make the complex really simple and they're able to communicate that. And I think it's a really powerful skill. And the other thing I take out of that is the question is the answer. Trevor Sylvester, the guy that I learned cognitive hypnotherapy from, that's what he always used to say. So the question is the answer. If anything, if you can ask less questions and say less, you will create more change in people because it's coming from out of their heart, their mind, their soul, their body. And I think it's having the patience to sit on your hands, especially when you want to tell them something that's similar,
Yeah.
you know.
And just to sit in silence and to sit in
Um,
a space of self-reflection, a space of thought, in a world of overstimulation, in a world where we've got to over communicate, to overthink, to overtype, actually, to overcoach, to overcoach. Um, Somebody said to me that coaching, and I like a metaphor, coaching is like putting salt on your food.
that's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. No one wants too much.
No one wants too much.
Yeah.
Too much and it ruins the taste.
I'm going to drop this into the TMP certification chat. This conversation. Um, so for those that are listening, going, what's that? We've got a certification running, so teaching you the core frameworks of being a mental performance coach, so you can help get better results with one-to-one clients. And the guys are now they're learning about timeline, they're learning about problem state, solution state, they're understanding, how do you have these conversations? And there's a couple of guys in there. Who were like, right, I've done a problem state and then a solution state, and then I've done a timeline, and then I've done a drop through, and then I've done this. And this is the exact message that they need to hear. And this is what I'm telling them. I'm saying, you don't need to do all that. You don't, they think value is squeezing more in when actually a lot of the value, just like you pointed out with Scott, it's a small tweak.
Yeah.
And that small tweak, just sit on your back foot a little bit. You just punch that a little bit harder and it's doing less work. That compounds into everything else. And I think that's super important. And I think that's the difference between coaching and mentorship. In my view, the difference between coaching and mentorship. And I like to dance between the two. And I'll also tell my clients, right, I'm going to come out of coach mode. I'm going to put my mentoring hat on. Coaching for me is creating the space for the client to come to their own conclusions and then making a change. Whereas the mentorship piece is a bit more direct. It's if I was in your shoes, here are the things I would be thinking about, and here are some of the processes that I would recommend implementing. What do you think? And I think that's a lot of coaches in particular. They think they need to tell the client everything and what to do, but that's not coaching. That's just prescribing.
Absolutely. I had a very profound moment for me, and again, we have these various, often self-perceptions of what success is, and sometimes they can go deep to your values as well. Now, my grandfathers were both military men, and I never met either of them because they'd both passed away before I was born, and at risk of not making this into a therapy session because it absolutely isn't, but maybe a therapist could go deep into those values or whatever. But I toyed around with for a number of years with joining the military, and then for various reasons never did. And anyway, I always had this itch to scratch that I wanted to work with the military. That for me was a real marker of high level operatives, high performers. I want to challenge myself amongst these high performers and being and around these high performers. And I managed to do some work with the RAF, which was super cool, and I really, really loved it. And I managed to spend a period of time with he's still active, so I won't name him, but a really senior member of the SAS, Special Air Service, and I thought, this is amazing. I'm gonna being around this guy, and then I hadn't actually realised we were actually going to do some work together, and we were going to do some coaching together, and all this, and I went from 1 minute it being super cool to then this unbelievable wave of imposter syndrome kicked in. And I was like, holy shit, you know, like, this guy's like 20 odd years in the SAS, you know, what am I going to be able to contribute here? What am I going to be able to, you know, add to this scenario? Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we go and have a brew, and I'm, you know, I'm still in contact with this guy now, and he's a dead nice fella, and I raise these concerns, and so I say to him, I say, I want you to teach me, particularly around the mental performance thing. I want you to teach me about and this is the key, and I want you to give me like the top 5 things that the SAS, you know, the hacks. When, as we know, there's no hacks.
Yeah.
As we know, it's all about the reps and all about the tweaks and everything we've talked about today. But I'd kind of dropped my guard, so to speak, and slipped a little bit. And he said, "Okay," he said, "I'll give you 5. I'll give you 5 things." He said, "Go and get pen and paper." And I said, "Brilliant, brilliant. You know, like, I'm ready for this." And I get me pen and paper, and he says, "In fact, I don't need to give you 5 things. I'm just going to give you 1." I said, "What is it?" He says, "We do the basics well." And I was like, "Is that it?" And he's like, "Yeah, write that down." I was like, "Fucking hell," you know.
It's the cosmic joke, isn't it? It's like the whole universe is conspired to that one moment
Yep,
to go,
yep.
there are no shortcuts. It's just doing the basics really boringly well.
Well, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm saying to the guys right now. They all want to run off and do all the different techniques all at once. And I'm like, no. Here are the 20% tools that will generate 80% of the results.
yeah,
If you're going to hang your hat on, just drill this. The right hand will take you around the block. The jab will take you around the world. Master
yep,
just drill that. And and it's funny because when you distill down all of these complicated fields, whether that's sports, business, art, music, whatever, it really is just doing the basics really well.
yep,
And obviously, I'm curious on your thoughts, but you have to have talent. Like, you have to have enough talent in the tank because you can do all of the basics really, really well. But at that 1% level, whether that's athletes, business, life, there does come down to a physiological component, which is there's a baseline of speed, power, accuracy. But in any field, if you want to be good, you just got to do the basics really well. I'm
yep.
curious on that. What's your thought around talent in particular?
I think there's levels. I think there's levels. There is, you know, I can practice snooker for the rest of my life, and I will never hit a ball anywhere near as good as not just Ronnie O'Sullivan, but the number 100 in the world right now.
Yeah.
That is just how it is. But talent is not enough.
It's
We
not.
have to have the practice and the repetition alongside that. So that then leads me to a subword and then another word. Alongside it, there has to be desire, and I think for me, I think that desire often comes when there's clarity, of what it is you're trying to achieve and who it is you're trying to be. I talk to world champions about winning, holding a belt over your head, or to a CEO about getting your business valuation to a certain number. But who do you want to be in that journey as well? And I think those things then feed behaviors on the days when you don't feel like it, or the days when you've got a cold, or the days when you're just a bit tired and jaded and can't be bothered, or the days when someone's let you down that you've put a load of time and effort into. I think that there absolutely is levels in terms of skill. There is levels in terms of leadership. Some people are more natural leaders than others, but we must always work on ourselves. We must always do the reps. We must always sharpen our blade. And I think when we're really clear on what we're doing and why, but also who we want to be in that journey, that's when we get the best. That's when we become the high performer.
who we want to be in the journey really resonates. I remember writing down who I didn't want to be first. I think I was 16, 17, and I wrote down who don't I want to be. And the guy I didn't want to be was the guy in the pub that coulda, shoulda, woulda. You know, as a boxer, when you go in the local pub, there was always someone that like, yeah, I used to box. Yeah, I could have been this. I could have been that. What happened? Oh, women and drink and this and that. And I was like, you couldn't then. It couldn't have been any other way, because if it would have been, it would have happened, but it didn't. So it couldn't have been any other way, you know? So I was very clear on that. And whilst I didn't achieve my Olympic dream, what I do look back at my boxing career is I have zero regrets, because I give it everything. I give it everything. But the thing that I didn't have, well, it was the talent. It was just like, one of my coaches even said to me, he said, "You're going to make a great coach one day." And I was insulted. I was absolutely, this was a really high level, international coach. And I was insulted, because as an athlete, you never want to hear that. You want to hear you're going to be world champion one day. But as I've grown up and matured, one thing I did have a talent of was business and people. So when I went into software sales, I applied the same level of meticulous detail and desire, but actually the ability and the talent that I had there enabled me to accelerate. And sometimes it is like, if you try and get a fish to climb up a tree, you have a tough time. But actually, if you put that fish down a river, it's gonna flow. But the core fundamentals are still the same. Turn up on time, do the work, draw the basics, get really, really good, and then eventually, it clicks. Rick, this has been amazing. I've deeply, deeply enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure everyone in our audience has too. There'll be one or two people, probably more, in our audience that says, "I want to work with Rick." How do they do that? What pathways have they got to come and work with you?
They have to make contact. They have to get in the right room. They have to get in the right areas. Anything that we want in life, we've got to go and get. We've got to go and get. So they can contact me at ricmoylan.co.uk, which is RICMOYLAN.co.uk.
I'll put a link in the podcast description. They can just click straight through to that.
All of my social channels at Ric Moylan, RICMOYLAN, and it will be me that replies. No bots, no anything like that. Reach out, say hello, and let's have a conversation. And that's how we can work together.
Cool. Rick, a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for the conversation. Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast and this episode, do subscribe, and do share it with anyone else that you think needs to hear this. And we're just going to keep bringing these conversations. Rick, pleasure and honor. Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.